tackling tough topics to help you think reasonably about life's most important issues. This is Thinker Sensitive.
This is Chad Graham with Thinker Sensitive on the rise of socialism. I'm here with Ben Crenshaw, my co-host. Ben, thanks for being on the show today. We're going to talk about universal health care. Ben, I've got a couple of questions for you. First of all, we've been talking about socialism. We've been talking about policies within socialist economic ordering and political ordering. I want to talk about universal health care. And what I mean by that is healthcare, equal healthcare, accessibility to healthcare for an entire population. And this is becoming more and more popular. I would say that it really kind of took off in the Obama administration, and I think we're going to see it cycle in and out as political seasons change. So I've noticed that a lot of socialists talk about universal health care in terms of rights. Is universal health care a right?
Yeah. Hi, Chad. Thanks for having me on. That's a really good question. And it seems that, healthcare is one of those things where, because it pertains to our physical health, our bodies, and our lives here, which has a huge impact on our quality of life, it's a very emotional topic. And it's very difficult to tell someone that they can't get healthcare because it costs too much or they can't afford it or something like that. Because we only have one life to live. And so it's a hugely important and emotional issue, and it's easy to kind of do armchair philosophy if you're young and healthy, right, and not recognize the real critical issues here. So yeah, let's dive into this idea of human rights, because that is one of the reasons that people try to justify this idea of universal health care for everybody. So part of the problem here, I think, is a misunderstanding and a perversion of what human rights are. And this has arisen pretty much within the last century. Mm-hmm. So if you go back to, say, the Declaration of Independence or the Bill of Rights or something like that in American history, you're going to find the basic idea of the distinction between positive and negative rights. So this isn't an evaluation like positive rights are good and negative rights are bad. Yeah. It's not anything like that. A negative right places duties of non-interference on other people. Mm-hmm. So if I have the right to life, then you have the duty not to take my life or interfere with it in some unjustifiable way. Right. A positive duty places obligations upon others to provide for you. Mm-hmm. So if there is such a thing as, well, let's say like within courts of law, you have the right to a trial by jury. Well, that means that the government has the obligation to provide a jury for you, mm-hmm, if you are charged with a crime. Mm-hmm. Okay, so it's not your right to go out and round up a jury of your friends or something like that. No, they provide it for you. Right. Now, the distinction between positive and negative rights is that negative rights are naturally occurring. Right. We don't have to do anything. We discover them within nature. They're created by God as interwoven into the natural order of things.
They're not reliant upon some law to instantiate them or make them real.
Exactly, and that's what positive rights are. Positive rights are essentially only obtained through contract. Mm-hmm. Contract or covenant. Covenants are a form of contracts. So the way the U.S. government works is that we have a contracts that say, within the criminal justice system, you have certain rights if you're accused of the crime. And we're going to provide right to an attorney. Now something like the right to be innocent until proven guilty could be construed as a natural right. Right. So anyway, there's a distinction between positive and negative rights. And if you go to the Declaration of Independence, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, these three are negative rights. And we understand life and liberty because we have those things already. The founders believed that all men were created free and equal, and they were free and equal in their natural liberty. The right to pursuit of happiness is not some hedonistic concept of like I should just be able to be happy and do whatever I want. What Jefferson meant by that was this Aristotelian concept of eudaimonia, mm-hmm, the good life. And it's not a right to a guarantee of a good and successful and happy life. It's the right to be able to pursue it, to be able to seek for it, to discover it, to
live toward it.
Exactly. Yes. To try to discover what it means to live well. Now, when you go to something like the Bill of Rights, you'll find that there's kind of a mix of positive and negative rights there. The right to religion is kind of like a right to conscience. A right to free speech is a natural right. The right to protect yourself with something like a firearm is a natural right. But there are other rights that are more positive in the sense that it was the creation of the Constitution, mm-hmm, and the Bill of Rights, which created an obligation within that political contract and charter for the government to provide these things to their citizens.
Yes.
So that's one major distinction between positive and negative rights.
How does healthcare fit into that?
Yeah, well, what you find is that you fast forward into the 20th century, and you'll find, two things. First of all, on the American scene, you have FDR's State of the Union address. I believe it was in 1944. I could be wrong on that, but he comes up with his idea of 4 freedoms. And his 4 freedoms are the right, or the freedom to speech, religion, or actually he said worship, which is wrong, and then the freedom from want and the freedom from fear. So if you have a right to be free from want and free from fear, good night. That places massive amounts of obligations upon the government, upon your neighbors, upon everyone else to make sure that you're never in want or need, and you're never fearful. You always feel secure.
And in light of his, those comments were made in light of World War.
Yeah.
Or at least the brink of it, in terms of if it was in 44, we were already there. But even still, in light of that, you have to guarantee an infinite level of resources to accommodate that right.
Exactly. And so what happens there is you have a mingling without any kind of distinction between positive and negative rights. So people start to think about positive rights as if they're negative. And this is what's happened with healthcare.
As if they're natural. Would that
as
be
if they're
another one?
natural,
Yeah.
exactly. As if, I naturally have a right to this, and if you don't provide it for me, you violated my person, my
natural
dignity.
rights.
Yes,
Yeah.
you've stripped me of something that's rightfully mine. The other advent was the UN Declaration of Human Rights. And what you find in there is this enumeration of supposedly negative natural rights to healthcare, to education, to security, so forth and so on. But there's no distinction between the conceptual difference between positive and negative rights. So by the 20th century, by the mid-20th century, you have this confusion going on, and that comes right into the discussion of healthcare. So people think, I have a right to healthcare, and when it's really a positive right, they're thinking of it as a negative right.
Right. And so if it is a negative right, then the government is responsible for providing for that in some way. And that leads to, if that resource isn't available, by going out into nature to find it, if it's a service, if it's provided by a person, like healthcare is, then the government has to do a couple of different things to ensure access to healthcare, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, and it's not just government. It's your doctor down the street. I mean, it's your medical professionals, your nurses and your physician assistants and your physical therapists and your occupational therapists and your surgeons and your medical doctors and your family doctors, anybody involved in the medical field, which is a huge amount of professions and people. All these people suddenly have this obligation, this duty to provide you with health care. Now, the critical issue here is that a right is a moral claim. And if it's not a positive right, meaning there's no contract, like you will provide me this service and I will give you some sort of compensation for it, that the contract is what gives rise to the moral claim within that setting. But if it's a negative right, it's a natural moral claim. So there is no contract necessary. So when someone says, I have a natural right to health care, that means I can make a moral claim against you as my healthcare provider
if you don't give it to me,
to provide me this service. And you don't have a choice. If you don't, you violated my person. You have violated a claim, a legitimate moral claim that I have, just as if you violated my right to life. Now, the problem, of course, with that is that not only should people be compensated justly for their labor, we all recognize that, but it essentially, it can compel people to provide medical services apart from their consent, and it can do so without any expectation of payment, which is nothing other than slavery.
Theft.
It is. It's theft. It's theft of someone's labor, and it's forced labor against someone else. So this is one of the main problems with seeing healthcare as a natural right, and it's not.
Now, to be fair, what most socialists provide as an answer, a response to this, is not, of course, that the police come in and enforce medical professionals to provide care to citizens on the street and citizens of need. What they do is they propose these massively bloated economic plans that provide healthcare professionals through subsidy, once again, this amount of money to provide these services. And so it comes with all of these economic infringements and entanglements. Talk a little bit about that. What does that do to the economic ordering in a free market?
Right. Well, obviously it drives up the cost.
Yeah.
Exponentially drives up the cost. And it drives down the quality of the medical service. And it drives down the quality of the medical service because there's no incentive for doctors to be more efficient. They don't even know what their labor is worth.
Right.
And of course, we know the frustration of wanting to go to the doctor and having no idea what they're gonna charge you.
Yes.
And you just kind of cross your fingers and hope that the bill from the insurance company isn't a couple $1,000s. Who knows? And of course, what this leads is perverse incentives on the part of the consumer who has a legitimate medical need but doesn't want to go to the doctor because they might get this impossible bill.
Right.
So there's all kinds of perverse incentives. When you take away market prices, when you take away competition, which has a tendency to drive down costs and elevate quality, when you take away the natural exchange, incentives, proper compensation for a person's productivity or labor, you have all kinds of perversities. So think about Obamacare. So what you had with Obamacare was this kind of we really want to say socialism light, but it was kind of this push toward, or maybe a precursor toward, universal health care type of idea. And it was trying to provide three things: quality health care that was affordable and accessible to everybody.
Yes.
And what it did was provided terrible health care that was highly expensive and unpredictable, and because of that, was not very accessible to a lot of people. And of course, it included things like the individual mandate, which was assault against the very person who either didn't want to engage in the health consumer market or couldn't afford to.
Right.
And
it drove up costs.
Exactly.
Yeah,
and one of the reasons is, it kind of like fixed prices, but then created subsidies to help people who couldn't afford it. And that's just absolutely the wrong way to go about this.
Yes.
Now we can give an example of the market in a different area that is able to achieve quality, affordability, and accessibility without any government intervention. Let's think about Apple's invention of the iPhone.
Yes.
They released the iPhone in 2007. It's hard to believe that that's just 11 years ago. But what they did was they created a quality product that at the time, was expensive, but a lot of people could afford it. But because they increased efficiency, increased quality, there was competition from Sony and Google and Android, all kinds of things, that drove down prices, it drove up quality, and therefore made it accessible to all kinds of people. So you have people who are living at the poverty line and they can afford an iPhone. How is that possible?
Yeah.
The market is able to achieve these three things that we find government can't do at the most basic issues.
And I even think of these auxiliary medical services that are out there. Laser hair removal.
Exactly.
As one, laser eye care, things like that, where it's they're procedures that may or may not be covered by your medical plan. And so people are going to these agencies and they're paying out of pocket or signing up for some sort of payment plan. And they're paying cash, hard cash, for these services. These small businesses are doing well. They're flourishing because they're getting cash and they're not having to wait for 3 months to 6 months, up to a year sometimes, to get payments from insurance agencies where it's kind of a wheel of fortune. Just spin the wheel and see what we're going to get for this service. It's a hard cost. They're getting hard cash. People are getting an effective, innovative solution. These eye care places are now advertising we can get you in and out of here in an hour's time and things like that. It's the market doing the market's work. You introduce all of these subsidies and inflated costs and mandates to buy health care and you destroy that auxiliary market.
Exactly. And so basically your point is that, and it's a legitimate one, absolutely, is that we already see how the market can achieve a universal type of quality, accessible, and affordable care to people using market mechanisms.
By staying out of the market.
Exactly. And so, this is a great example of how, if I was, God forbid that laser eye surgery ever is taken over by insurance companies, because it probably costs $10,000 an eye. But right now I can consider it because it's within my ability to pay for it.
Yeah.
The other huge problem with the health industry today is that there's a confusion between health care and health insurance.
Yes.
And insurance is supposed to insure against risk. And risk is not something that you expect to happen every other week or once a year, your annual.
Part of the normal maintenance of the human body. Right.
Risk is supposed to insure against these major medical disasters that are going to happen. And so when you have insurance companies that are trying to pay for regular care, it just creates bloated costs, terrible incentives, low quality. So there's just it's the wrong way to think about medical care. And we could do a lot better if we followed a market model, both within the medical field and in other markets as well.
So we don't think universal health care is a human right.
No.
We do think it's very important. We do think that any sort of economic ordering or political ordering has to take into account the care of its citizens.
Absolutely.
But we don't think it's a human right, and quite honestly, we would be better off if government would get out of the healthcare market and let the market do what it needs to do, and we could see what things cost before we engage the service, and we could really get back to paying people an adequate and responsible moral wage for the work that they're doing.
Yeah, and we want to stress, as market advocates, it's not that we don't care about people's health. It's precisely because we care so much about our own health and other people's health that we want to see the healthcare industry freed up by market innovation.
Yes.
It can do it.
It can.
But people have lost both the knowledge of what the market is, especially in terms of its moral advantage, but also in terms of its real efficiency. And they've lost trust in it.
Ben Crenshaw here talking with me about universal health care and policy episodes underneath socialism. And please be sure to check out our universal basic income episode and also our free college tuition episode. Ben, thanks for coming.
Thanks, Chad.
For more Thinker-Sensitive content, visit thinkersensitive.com. Be sure to find us on iTunes and YouTube as well.